My parents bought my sister a car for college with the money my grandparents gave me. Hi, I'm Rachel, and I only found out after working myself to exhaustion, paying rent to my own parents and eating ramen for dinner every night. Would you forgive your family after something like that? Tell me in the comments. What would you have done? I didn't know that night would become the turning point of my life. Honestly, I thought it'd be something simple, maybe a "we're proud of you" speech, or even a shared toast over iced tea. It was a warm Thursday in July, the kind of summer evening where the windows stayed open and the sound of sprinklers hissed through the air like soft static. Dinner was already on the table when I came down: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. It smelled exactly like home, which made what happened next feel even more surreal. I took my usual seat at the end of the table, the one I'd occupied since I was 5. The chair still had a tiny sticker of a dolphin on the backrest, peeling from years of cleaning. Maddie, my younger sister, sat across from me, tapping away on her phone, the blue glow lighting up her face. She barely looked up as I took my first bite. "I got my class schedule today," I said, maybe too brightly. "Intro to Psych at 9, then English Comp. Pretty packed Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I think I can handle it." No one replied right away. Cheryl, Mom, kept cutting her chicken with steady, robotic movements. Dad passed the salt to Maddie. Finally, Cheryl looked up and cleared her throat. "That's great," she said. Her tone was smooth, almost rehearsed. "But actually, we wanted to talk to you about that." I blinked. "About my schedule?" "No," Dad said, his voice quiet. "About everything." Maddie, still chewing, muttered, "Uh-oh," under her breath and grinned at her plate. Mom folded her hands. "You're 18 now, Rachel, an adult, and part of growing up is learning how to stand on your own 2 feet. I stopped chewing. A small, uneasy twist settled in my stomach. "What does that mean?" "It means," she continued, "we've decided not to fund your college education. You'll need to cover tuition, books, commuting, everything." For a second, all I could hear was the clink of Maddie's fork against her plate. I laughed, a dry, awkward sound. "Wait, seriously?" Dad leaned back in his chair. "It's time you learned the value of responsibility. We've given you a strong foundation, but from here, you need to take charge of your own future." I stared at them, feeling like I'd misheard. "I'm going to community college, not Stanford. I picked a school close to home because I didn't want to put financial pressure on anyone. I have savings, but I thought—" I stopped, realizing how naive that sounded now. "That's exactly why we believe you'll be fine," Mom said, lifting her glass. "You've always been resourceful." Across the table, Maddie asked, "Can I have another roll?" Without missing a beat. Mom stood to fetch it for her. She didn't offer me one. I looked at Maddie's plate: chicken breast, mashed potatoes, piled high, 2 rolls, green beans, and a tiny slice of pie. Mine was half that. I'd served myself. No one had even noticed. "I'll still live here while I'm studying," I said slowly, trying to find some anchor in this conversation. "Right." Dad met my eyes. "If you live here, you'll pay rent and contribute to groceries. It's only fair." I felt like the air had thickened, like breathing suddenly required more effort. I put my fork down. "Is this because you can't afford it? Or because you don't want to?" Silence. Maddie scrolled on her phone. "That's not the point," Mom replied. "This is about preparing you for the real world." I stared at my half-eaten dinner. It tasted like sawdust now. The rest of the meal passed in a haze. Maddie chatted about cheer camp. She had new uniforms coming in, and Mom promised to take her shopping for practice gear over the weekend. "We'll go to Target and pick up that water bottle you liked," Mom said cheerfully. Nobody looked at me. Not really. Later that night, I sat on my bed, phone in hand, screen glowing in the dark. I opened my savings app. The number stared back at me. $2,381.32. That was after my last cafe paycheck, tips, and graduation money combined. I did the math in my head. Tuition, books, monthly rent, gas. It wasn't enough, not even close. I heard laughter downstairs. Probably Maddie showing off a meme or talking about her new nail set. That night, as I stared at the ceiling in the same room where I once lined up stuffed animals like in a classroom, I realized something ugly and sharp. This wasn't about money. It was about choice. They had made a choice. To support Maddie. To watch me struggle. Maybe they thought I'd tough it out or grow stronger, but what they really told me, without saying it, was that I wasn't worth investing in. And that was the night I made a promise to myself. I would finish college, I would pay every rent check, every grocery bill, and one day I'd move out, build a life they had no part in, and I'd never owe them a damn thing again. College itself wasn't the problem. The lectures were fine, professors fair, classmates mostly forgettable. No, the hard part wasn't the academics, it was everything else. Getting up before the sun, running on caffeine and hope, pretending that rent didn't hang over my head like a second major. Fall settled fast in Oregon. The rain started early that year, soft at first, then turning into that familiar, steady drizzle that felt like background noise to my new normal. I'd pull on my hoodie, still damp from the day before, and catch the 6:25 a.m. bus with cold cereal in my stomach and exhaustion in my bones. Our house, if you could still call it mine, hadn't changed. My bedroom still had the same peeling Finding Nemo sticker on the closet door, the one Maddie and I had stuck on years ago. My desk doubled as my dinner table most nights, ramen packets stacked like books on the corner. My laptop, secondhand, 3 dents, missing an N key, was both my classroom and my escape. I had class from 8 to noon most days, then headed straight to the cafe, a little hole-in-the-wall place called Bean and Barley. I pulled 4 to 6 hour shifts making lattes for customers who couldn't spell cappuccino, wiping tables sticky with sugar, and burning my fingers on metal pitchers no one ever let cool down. By the time I got home at 10, I'd missed dinner. Again. One night, I dragged myself into the kitchen and saw a Post-it slapped on the fridge. Electric bill is up. Turn things off when not in use. Mom. Underneath it, Maddie had scribbled a heart. How thoughtful. I opened the fridge. Mostly condiments, a half-empty jug of milk, and leftover meatloaf Maddie had claimed 2 nights ago. I closed it without taking anything and headed upstairs. As I passed her room, the door was open. Inside, Maddie lounged on her bed, brand new AirPods gleaming. She scrolled through her phone, giggling. Mom got these for me, she said, not even looking up. You should try them. Seriously, the sound is insane. I stood in the doorway, damp from the drizzle, the scent of espresso still on my hoodie. Maybe when I'm not paying rent, I said. She laughed lightly, as if I'd made a joke, then went back to her screen. Rent, grocery bills, gas money, every dollar I made already had somewhere to go. Every decision had to be weighed. Gas or groceries, textbook or tampons. That week I worked 28 hours and made just under $300. After rent and chipping in for groceries, I had less than $60 left. On Thursday, I splurged. Peanut butter on toast, not just ramen. Friday afternoon, after our sociology class, Jazz caught up with me. We'd partnered on a group project once, and since then she always made a point to wave or sit near me in the library. "Did you eat lunch?" she asked, holding a plastic sandwich bag. I lied. "Yeah, earlier." She looked at me and said nothing, just unwrapped her sandwich and split it in half. "Humor me," she said, handing me a piece. I took it. It was peanut butter and banana, soggy around the edges but still the best thing I'd eaten all day. Sometimes kindness doesn't come in big gestures. It's in half a sandwich, in not asking too many questions, in letting someone feel full for a change. The next night, I found myself walking home in the rain after my shift. My canvas shoes were soaked through. As I approached the front steps, I saw the porch light was off again. Mom must have been serious about the electricity. Inside, I passed the living room. Maddie's shopping bags lined the couch, pink, gold, glittering. I stepped over a discarded shoebox and carried my 2 boxes of day-old muffins up to my room. I'd saved them from the cafe trash, half smashed but edible. Dinner for the week. I sat cross-legged on my bed, phone in hand. The banking app blinked at me. $41.17. That had to last me 5 days. I looked over at the ramen tower on my desk and made a mental note: alternate between chicken and beef flavor to avoid taste fatigue. It was past midnight when I finally lay down. The wind knocked against the window. Somewhere down the hall, Maddie's laughter echoed faintly. That's when I noticed something outside my window. On the small ledge beneath it sat a plastic Tupperware container. Inside, soup, still warm, and a folded note taped to the lid. "Eat, please. Doris." My throat tightened. Doris had been our neighbor since forever. She used to babysit Maddie and me when we were little, made sugar cookies shaped like animals, let us color in her crossword books. She still tended to her garden with a sun hat twice the size of her head and always smelled faintly of lavender. I hadn't spoken to her in months, and somehow she had still seen me. That soup tasted like memory, like compassion, like the exact thing I'd been starving for. In this life, rough days can weigh you down, but there's always room for grace if we remember to care for each other. That night, grace came in a bowl of soup left by a woman who never stopped seeing me, even when I was invisible inside my own home. I placed the empty Tupperware on the windowsill when I was done, with a post-it of my own. "Thank you." The SUV was silver with a sunroof and smelled like lavender-scented plastic. I knew that because Maddie made me sit in it. It was parked in our driveway when I got home from work, still wearing my stained cafe apron, fingers sore from pulling espresso handles for 7 hours straight. I almost didn't recognize it at first. My mind tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a neighbor's. Maybe someone was visiting. But then Maddie ran outside, ponytail bouncing, her voice shrill with glee. "They got me a car!" she squealed. "Isn't it cute?" Cute, like it was a puppy or a new purse. I tightened my grip on my backpack, the strap already fraying at the seams. I felt the weight of my textbooks, my work shoes, and the half-eaten muffin I'd saved for dinner all dig into my spine. My legs ached, my ears still rang from the milk steamer, but the real pain sat somewhere deeper. I didn't say anything, just nodded and walked past her, stepping carefully around the scattered dorm shopping bags littering the living room. Target tags still dangled from pastel comforters, string lights, a rose gold desk lamp. On the coffee table, there were 3 different mood boards printed out, one labeled Dorm Cozy, another Productivity Vibe. I remembered my own move-in day, 2 years ago now. No balloons, no cake. I packed my things into a duffel bag and caught the bus. The only decoration I brought to my dorm room was a chipped mug I used as a pen holder. I found it in a clearance bin. That night, the family held a celebratory dinner. Steak, real steak, not ground beef shaped into patties. Roasted vegetables, sparkling lemonade, and a chocolate cake that said, "You did it, Maddie," in pink frosting. I sat at the far end of the table. Cheryl, Mom, beamed with pride, refilling Maddie's glass. "Your hard work paid off, sweetheart. You're going places." Maddie giggled. "And now I can drive there, too." Cheryl laughed. "Well, we just thought it would make commuting easier. Plus, every girl needs something reliable." Mark, Dad, nodded from behind his wine glass. "She deserves the best." The same parents who once told me they couldn't afford a bus pass were now singing car commercials. I pushed my food around my plate, trying to swallow each bite past the lump in my throat. No one asked me how school was going. No one noticed that I was wearing the same cardigan I'd worn 3 years ago to my high school graduation. Later that night, I walked past Maddie's open door. Inside, her dorm supplies were neatly stacked, matching storage bins, twinkle lights, a Bluetooth speaker, and a laptop that still had its plastic film on. She sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through Pinterest, pinning photos of dorm plants she'd never water. I returned to my room and pulled the door shut behind me. My bed sagged under the weight of textbooks and laundry. The quilt on it was the same one I'd had since age 10, faded stars and moons barely visible anymore. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the screen. I wasn't going to do it. I didn't want to dump my bitterness on anyone. But then I saw the voicemail notification from the electric company and realized I'd forgotten to pay the bill. Again. That's when I scrolled through my contacts and tapped Grandpa Hank's name. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey, kiddo," he said, voice low and warm. "What's going on?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. The sound of his voice cracked something open in me. I hadn't heard anyone speak to me with kindness in months. I started, but my voice caught. He waited. "I'm okay?" I lied. "No, you're not," he said gently, "but I've got time. Talk to me." So I did. I told him about school, the cafe, how I barely had enough for gas and groceries, how Cheryl had asked me to start Venmoing her for water usage, how Maddie got AirPods, a new car, a college fund, and a Target registry while I reused Ziploc bags to stretch peanut butter sandwiches through the week. Grandpa didn't interrupt, just listened. Occasionally he'd make a sound, or a soft sigh. But mostly, he let the silence stretch when I needed to breathe. When I finished, he didn't speak for a long moment. Then, "Rachel, when you were 12, your mother told you she couldn't drive you to that sleepover because Maddie needed the car." I blinked. "You remember that?" "Like it was yesterday. You walked 3 miles in rain to get there." I told her I didn't mind. "I know, but I did." His voice had changed. Not angry, but solid, like stone settling. "You've been trying to be fine for a long time, kiddo," he said, "but you don't have to keep being their punching bag just to prove you're strong." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was tight. "You still working at that cafe?" he asked. "Yeah." "You still baking?" "A little. Not as much." "Well, I still have the mixer you loved when you were 10. Might need dusting off. You want it?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Maybe." Maybe's a good start. We talked a little more, about nothing, really. The weather, the new fence he was putting up, how Grandma had taken up online quilting classes, and now the guest room looked like a fabric store exploded. He promised to send photos. When we hung up, I just sat there, the hum of the fridge outside my room the only sound. It wasn't that the call changed anything concrete. Maddie still had her SUV. My bank account was still sad. Cheryl and Mark would still expect rent on Friday. But something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. Grandpa's house smelled like cinnamon and dust and something I couldn't quite name, but felt like comfort. The front steps creaked the same way they always had, and the rocking chair on the porch still swayed slightly in the breeze, even when no one sat in it. It was the kind of place that didn't ask much from you, just your presence, just your honesty. When I arrived, I hadn't planned on staying long. I just wanted to see him in person, to feel normal for a minute, to sit across from someone who looked me in the eye without judgment. He greeted me at the door in his usual jeans and flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up. His hair had more gray than I remembered, or maybe I'd just never looked closely enough. "Hey, kiddo," he said, pulling me into a hug that lasted a beat longer than it needed to. "Come on in. I made muffins." I smiled, the edges of it barely reaching my cheeks. "Of course you did." We sat in the kitchen, the one with the linoleum tiles that were chipped at the corners and cabinets that didn't quite close right. The muffins were apple cinnamon, still warm, and he handed me one without asking, just like he used to when I came home from a bad day in middle school, back when I cried because Maddie got the bigger piece of cake or Mom forgot to pick me up from band rehearsal. But today, I didn't cry. I just sat there with the muffin in my hand, not eating it, not speaking. Grandpa poured coffee into chipped mugs. "I figured you might want something stronger, but I'm all out of whiskey," he joked, then softened. "Tell me what's been going on." So I did. I told him about the cafe, about the late nights, the double shifts, the aching feet, and the way my boss always asked if I could stay just one more hour. I told him about the rent payments, how Mom had started texting me every time the water bill ticked upward. I told him about Maddie's car, the dorm shopping sprees, the celebration dinner with the pink frosted cake. I didn't mean to vent, but once I started, I couldn't stop. It came out in waves, like a dam finally cracking open. All the small humiliations, the post-it notes on the fridge, the leftovers marked Maddie only, the silence at the dinner table, the way they looked through me. Like I was a ghost, they still charged rent. When I finally stopped, Grandpa didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, eyebrows slightly furrowed, lips pressed together like he was chewing something bitter. Then he asked, "Rachel, whatever happened to the money?" I blinked. "What money?" His voice was careful, too careful. "The money your grandmother and I gave your parents, for your education." My brain struggled to catch up. I don't know what you mean." He leaned back in his chair, his hand resting gently on the table like he needed to ground himself. "When you turned 16, we gave your parents $50,000, a fund for your college, tuition, books, whatever you needed." He said it like it was a known fact, a shared memory. But I had never heard those words before in my life. My muffin fell from my hand and landed softly on the table. "You gave them what?" $50,000. We'd been saving for years. Your grandmother made me promise we'd set something aside for you. We told your parents it was only for you. They said they'd keep it in a separate account until you graduated." I stared at him, at the worry lines deepening around his eyes, at the truth stretching out between us, louder than any yell. "They never told me," I said. My voice was barely audible. "They said they couldn't afford to help, that I needed to learn responsibility." Grandpa's eyes didn't leave mine. "They stole it," he said flatly. "That money was for you, not them, not Maddie." I didn't feel anger. Not yet. Not like I expected. What I felt first was numbness. The kind that wrapped around your chest and made everything slow. I looked around the kitchen, the only place that had ever felt steady, and tried to breathe through it. "I've been eating peanut butter sandwiches for 2 years," I said, "skipping meals to make rent. I've taken on debt I can't even look at because I thought—" I didn't finish. I didn't have to. Grandpa stood, walked slowly to the counter, and pulled a folder from the drawer. He didn't open it, just placed it on the table between us. "I kept copies of everything," he said. "Bank transfers, letters, even the note your mom wrote thanking us, said she'd make sure Rachel gets every opportunity." Her words. I looked at the folder, but didn't touch it. He sat back down and reached across the table, placing one weathered hand over mine. "You're not crazy," he said gently. "You're not ungrateful, and you're certainly not weak." The knot in my chest started to loosen, just barely. "I should have followed up," he said, voice tinged with regret. "I thought they were doing right by you." "It's not your fault," I said, surprising myself. "You trusted them." We sat in silence for a while. Outside, wind moved through the trees. A dog barked a few houses down. The world continued, indifferent to my unraveling. Finally, Grandpa leaned forward. "This ends now," he said, voice low and steady. "I'll talk to them. You don't need to carry this alone anymore." I nodded slowly. My hand was still shaking under his. He pressed something warm into my palm. Another muffin. This one slightly misshapen, a little darker around the edges. "Take it for the road," he said. "Just like when I was 10 and the school nurse called to say I'd had a panic attack during math class. Just like that day, when he didn't ask questions, he just handed me a muffin and told me I was going to be okay. I didn't cry. Not then. But my hands trembled on the steering wheel all the way home. The final straw wasn't a slammed door or a screaming match. It was a quiet Saturday morning. I'd just come back from a shift at the cafe, sore, sticky with steamed milk, and no one looked up when I walked in. The house was too quiet, too normal. The dishwasher hummed. The fridge buzzed. Maddie was curled on the couch flipping through a glossy dorm catalog. Cheryl sat at the dining table writing a list in her planner. Mark scrolled through his phone. No one said a word. And that was it. That was the moment I knew I was done. Sometimes it's not the cruelty that breaks you, it's the absence of care, the silence that follows years of small betrayals. The night before, Grandpa had come by. Not for dinner. He wouldn't have been welcome at the table. But to speak with Cheryl and Mark in the front yard. I watched from my bedroom window, the light from the porch stretching across the lawn like a stage spotlight. He stood tall, arms crossed, not angry, but immovable. Later, he told me how it went. "I asked them," he said, point blank, "what happened to the $50,000. They didn't deny it. Cheryl said they'd used it for the family, for Maddie's school. She needed it more, she had said. Rachel would figure it out. And then Grandpa gave them a choice: repay the fund in full or be removed from the will. No negotiation. They looked stunned, he told me, like consequences weren't a real thing. He paused. But Rachel, I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because I needed you to know someone sees you, someone still believes in fairness. I couldn't speak, just nodded. That morning, with the silence echoing louder than any insult, I pulled my suitcase from under the bed. It had dust on it. I wiped it with the sleeve of my sweatshirt, folded clothes slowly, methodically, packed books, the chipped mug I used as a penholder, my college binder, filled with highlighted articles and handwritten notes, a half-used tube of lip balm from a free clinic basket. As I zipped the suitcase, a sound at the door caught my attention. Maddie. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, brows furrowed. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer right away, just zipped the bag, pulled it upright, and looked her in the eye. "Ask Mom and Dad." Her mouth opened like she might say something, defensive maybe, or confused, but I didn't wait to hear it. Downstairs, the air was still thick. Cheryl glanced up as I passed but didn't speak. Mark looked away. No one stopped me. I left a note on the kitchen counter, written in neat, firm letters. "I'm leaving. Don't call." I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I just walked out. The air outside felt different, cooler, cleaner, like the moment after a storm when everything smells like new earth and pine needles. As I loaded my suitcase into Grandpa's car, a flash of memory hit me. Maddie and me, ages 6 and 4, chasing each other through sprinklers in the backyard, our faces painted with popsicle drips, our laughter rising above the hum of the lawnmower. That was before favoritism, before resentment, before money became the measuring stick for love. I let the image fade. The drive to Grandpa's was quiet. No radio, just the windows half down and the hum of the engine. I watched the streets turn from the rigid order of suburban rows to the crooked familiarity of his neighborhood, houses with porches and wind chimes, dogs barking behind fences, mailboxes painted by hand. When we pulled into the gravel driveway, Grandpa didn't say anything. He just got out and came around to open my door. I stepped out. The house smelled like fresh bread. The windows were open. A bird chirped somewhere nearby. "This is where you belong," Grandpa said simply, then pulled me into a hug so tight I could finally let my shoulders drop. No speeches, no lectures, just arms that held me like I mattered. That night, I unpacked slowly, hung my clothes in a closet that smelled like cedar, set my books on a shelf Grandpa had cleared for me. The bed had fresh sheets and a blanket with sunflowers. There was a note on the nightstand in Grandpa's handwriting. "In this house, you don't owe anything for being yourself." I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, screen glowing. A text from Jazz had come in 2 hours ago. "Did you leave?" I typed back, "Yes." Finally. Then I turned off the light. And for the first time in years, I slept without bracing for a knock on the door, or a post-it about the electric bill, or a reminder of what I owed. I was gone. And I wasn't going back. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to breathe. And slowly, over the years, I learned how. Turns out healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with fireworks or grand speeches. It's quiet. It's in the way you no longer brace for a comment when you enter a room, in how you stop checking your bank account 10 times a day out of panic, in how your shoulders slowly lower week by week until they remember what it feels like to rest. By 2020, I was running the early morning shifts at Grandpa's bakery. We called it Hank's Rise and Crumb. The name stuck, probably because Grandpa insisted on it, but also because it felt right. Everything here rose: dough, light, and sometimes people. The bakery had old wooden beams, chalkboard menus, and the kind of lighting that made everyone's skin look soft. Locals came for the muffins, but stayed for the warmth. Doris brought fresh-cut flowers every Friday and always left with 3 lemon scones and a wink. Jazz came by before her shifts at the library, sometimes bringing new playlist ideas for the cafe speakers. College took longer than I planned, 4.5 years in total. I studied on flour-dusted counters and between batches of cinnamon rolls. Grandpa helped me practice my presentations, pretending to be a grumpy professor while icing cookies. The day I walked across the stage in my borrowed cap and gown, he wore a suit and clapped loudest. And then came today, my first solo cupcake line. We'd been planning it for months, new recipes, branding, even little display signs. I picked soft pastels for the packaging and names that meant something to me. Courage, resilience, grace, and one that made Grandpa chuckle when I first said it aloud. Freedom. I wrote the name on a tiny sign and added in parentheses, lemon glaze, bittersweet but bright. Because that's what it felt like. Freedom. A little sharp, a little sweet, and completely earned. Customers filled the shop faster than I expected. The bell above the door jingled non-stop. There were parents with toddlers, teenagers on scooters, and 2 elderly women who sat by the window and split a brownie while commenting on everyone's outfits. Doris arrived right before the rush, wearing a scarf with dancing cats on it. She handed me a mason jar wrapped in a tea towel. "For when life feels plain," she said. Inside was her homemade strawberry jam. It smelled like June. Jazz showed up 30 minutes later and pulled me into a hug that nearly knocked my apron off. "You really did it," she whispered. I smiled. We did. The front counter was chaos, in the best way. Grandpa sat off to the side, retired but still claiming the same stool by the window. He nodded at me every time I glanced over. Didn't say much, just smiled, like he always knew I'd get here. At one point, I stepped into the back to catch my breath. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A text. From Maddie. "I didn't know. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long moment. There was no anger left in me, no need to rehash. I didn't even feel satisfaction, just peace. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Sometimes silence isn't a wound, it's a boundary. I tucked the phone away and looked around the kitchen. The oven timer ticked down slowly, the scent of vanilla and lemon filling the space. My hands moved automatically, folding napkins, aligning cupcake trays, checking frosting bags. It all felt rhythmic, steady. I turned back toward the storefront, heart full. "All right," I whispered. "Let's bake something real." The smell of lemon glaze still reminds me of that first morning I chose peace over pride. I didn't need an apology, I just needed room to rise. What I've learned is this: family doesn't always mean fairness, and love shouldn't come with conditions. When people show you their limits, you're allowed to set your own, and sometimes healing looks like a cupcake with your name on it, served warm with quiet dignity. If this story stirred something in you, an old memory, a quiet ache, or a small triumph, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Somewhere out there, someone might need to know they're not the only one who left quietly and found home elsewhere.